Hi everybody, welcome to another Best of British Blackwell. Today we're going to be making a classic fish pie. I know there's a lot of people out there that either love or hate this recipe, but I've been asked to show it quite a few times now. It's a personal favourite of mine. So come over, have a look at the ingredients, I'll show you how simple it is to make. Here we have our ingredients. Starting off with our fish. What I've got here is some cod pieces, some beautiful chunky cod pieces there. We've also got a couple of pieces of fresh salmon here. We've got some smoked haddock as well. Now you can use any fish you like in here. You can use mainly haddock, you could use unsmoked haddock, you could use mainly salmon and a smaller amount of cod pieces. Personally, I think that it's the cod and the haddock that give that lovely meaty texture to this pie. You have to also remember that the beginnings of this pie, or the history of this dish, goes back to, you know, trying to really fill people up, and these were the cuts of fish and the types of fish that they would have used originally in there. Salmon would have come on a little bit later on. Finally, we've got some prawns here as well, which we're going to add to the dish at the very last minute. Ideally, I would have liked to have got hold of some uncooked raw prawns, but I wasn't able to today, so I'm going to use these. What else have we got? In this pie, we're also going to have some peas to add some greenery in there. We're also going to be adding some spring onions. You can use red onions, you can use white onions, Spanish onions, shallots, anything you like. Personally, I like the sweetness that the spring onions give you, so I'll be using those. The other ingredients that we've got here, we're going to be using some fish stock. I've got some Knorr fish stock cubes. We've got some single cream, which we're going to be poaching the fish in. We've also got some Trackerman spiced honey mustard, just to add a little bit of pepper and a little bit of heat into the fish pie mix. And then finally, we've got our potatoes, which we're going to use for the mash on the top. And we've got some cheese, which we're going to incorporate into that as well. The butter is going to be used to help us fry off the onions and also get that mashed potato nice and creamy. So that's the first thing. We'll make a start on the mashed potato, then I'll show you how to construct the rest of the fish pie dish. When making this dish, I always like to start off with the mashed potato, because you can put it to one side, you can leave it in a bowl to cool. It doesn't matter if you're using it when it's cool a little bit later on when you're putting it on top of the pie. The pie is going to be going in the oven anyway, so you're going to be reintroducing some heat into that mashed potato. So what I've done here is I've just fairly thinly chopped up some potatoes after peeling them. I'm going to boil them away, and I'm going to show you just very quickly in a couple of seconds how I'm going to make the mash for this dish, because it's slightly different to the mash that I usually make. Okay, so our potatoes are now boiled away. Now, I know I've shown you how to make mash before. I'm not trying to show you the same thing over and over again. I'm just going to show you this because I make this mash slightly differently to the other mash that I tend to make when I'm cooking. The basics are still the same though. So you have about 50 grams worth of butter. Add that straight into your pan. This pan is the same pan that we've used to just boil the potatoes. The potatoes are just straining off behind me. The reason I like to use the same pan is obviously it retains the same amount of heat. We get some garlic granules. I don't usually use garlic granules in mash, but because this mash is going to be twice cooked, the strength of the garlic granules here is going to cook out. I tend to find that using garlic granules, or garlic in fact, in normal mash, just tends to be overpowered. What we're also going to add in here as well is some herbs de Provence, or some mixed herbs you could use in here as well. I don't like to add that to the fish. I don't want it to overpower the fish sauce, but I do want there to be a nice herby texture coming through the mash. Now, what do? We get our potatoes next. They've been strained off quite nicely. We add them straight back into the pan. Let's get our seasoning in there. So, some salt, some pepper. Now let's start to mash this up. Come back to me when I've got it into the texture that I want it, and then I will start to add the rest of my ingredients. Okay, so in terms of using the masher and mashing this potato, we're pretty much done, but as you can see, the potato's still got quite a fluffy, dry texture, and that's going to be no good for us. So now we're going to start to add ingredients which are going to bring this to the consistency that we want. We're going to add first a little dash of our single cream. Not too much straight away. Then what we're also going to do is get some of our cheese in there. And then rather than use anything else like the masher again, which is only just going to continue to batter this into a pulp, we use a fork. I've said before that the fork allows you to introduce air into this mixture as well. The teeth of the fork will also run through the mash and start to break down any of those lumps that are left behind in there. And as you can see, pretty much immediately the cheese starts to melt. We start to get some lovely oils from that cheese. The cream starts to introduce itself to the other ingredients, and we start to get a really nice creamy texture. It's at this stage which I'm going to add the Trackerman's spiced honey. I've used this before, it's wonderful. It's got that lovely, beautiful mixture of sweetness and heat from the mustard that can go straight in. And it's also at this stage I'm going to add some spring onion tops, which I chopped off of the spring onions that I'll be using in the fish pie later. This adds a lovely bit of colour, but also a lovely sweet bite into this potato mix as well. Let's just make sure we get everything off of there. We don't want to waste any of these ingredients. They all add to the flavour. That's lovely. Beautiful. Now we continue to give this a mix, and as you can see already, we're starting to develop beautiful mash. Not quite there yet. A little bit more in the way of cheese. Just leave yourself a tiny bit left for later on when we're going to top the rest of the pie with some cheese and another little dash of cream, and I would say that will be about it. Let's just give that a final stir. Mix all the ingredients together. You can really smell the garlic coming off of this mash now as well, and that's just going to add another flavour dimension to this beautiful dish. That mashed potato for me is done. Now our mashed potato is done, let's make a start on the wonderful filling of this pie. Get yourself about 30 grams of butter and start to melt it down into a hot saucepan. Once the butter starts to melt, it's going to melt pretty much straight away. Take your spring onions, get those guys straight in there as well. First step is to sweat these beautiful spring onions down. You're not looking for golden brown, you're just looking for sweated down. There you can see our spring onions just starting to soften, and that's when we know that we're ready to add the next ingredient. And the next ingredients are the single cream. So you'll notice that I bought two 300ml single cream. I've used about 100 already for the mashed potato. So in total here, we're using about 500ml single cream. Make sure you get it all in there. Now, turn the heat right down. Give this a bit of a stir. Now what we're going to do is take one of our Knorr fish stock cubes and grind that up. Get that inside that cream. Now, just sit back and let this cream warm through with that lovely spring onion and fish stock. As you can see, all of the ingredients there have started to merge together, and it's at this stage that I add the second fish stock. I do it in two sections mainly because you don't want to add too much of an ingredient too quickly, especially something as important as this fish stock here. It can clump together, it can stick together, and it just creates a bit of a gritty texture if it's not well cooked in before you start adding your other ingredients. Plus, you want to make sure that this is cooked out and incorporated into the mixture long before you put the fish in, because pretty much as soon as you put the fish in, you're going to reduce the heat down to next to nothing and start to poach the fish, and you don't want to be moving it around to try and get rid of any lumps in your sauce. Okay, so our basic fish stock there with the lovely cream, spring onions and butter has reached the consistency that we want it. Now I start to add the pieces of cod just one by one. Get the cod in first, because it is the more robust out of all of these pieces of fish that we're putting in there. And like I said, we're not going to stir this once it's in, so the cod will basically sit at the bottom. So we get that in first, and as you can see, I've chopped these up into decent sized pieces. We get those in, and then we just get ready to put the other bits in. Leave that there for about 2 or 3 minutes. Cod's been in there now for about a minute, maybe two. Now we start to add our haddock. It's the second most robust ingredient in there, but it's certainly got the most flavour. That's why we're not using as much of the haddock as we are the cod, because you don't want that to be overpowering. So we get that in there, and then finally the pieces of salmon just placed on the top. Let them poach away on the top there. The likelihood is that these pieces of salmon may disintegrate slightly, but you don't need to worry about that. That's likely to happen anyway, but you will certainly still pick their flavour up in there. Finally, all we do now is we let this simmer away for, I would say, about 5 to 6 minutes. Sorry, let me just put the lid on there. Lid on, simmer away on the lowest temperature, on the lowest heat, for about 5 to 6 minutes before we transfer it into its baking dish. The filling to our pie has been cooking away for about 5 or 6 minutes now. As you can see, it's beautiful. It's taken on a lovely thick texture. All that remains for us to do now is to start to spoon this into our baking dish. One part of the recipe which I didn't show you is me just adding the peas. The peas have probably been sitting in here for about 3 or 4 minutes now. I put them in about a minute after I stuck the rest of the ingredients into the pan. So here we go. There we go. Beautiful fish pie. All we need to do now is just get the rest of that sauce in there. What I'm going to do, just give it a little mix. The fish stock is going to create almost a bit of a gelatinous kind of texture to this, which is fine. It can look a little bit like something's curdled inside the pan. That hasn't happened. All you need to do is just get your spoon in there, give it a decent mix around, and you'll start to see that that just dissipates straight away. That's absolutely fine. Let me put this to one side. Now, you'll remember that I've got some prawns to go in here. It's at this stage that I add these prawns, mainly because they've already been cooked. So what I do is I take these prawns and I just start to incorporate them into this dish, just straight over the top. The mashed potato that we're going to use a little bit later is going to afford them some protection. You don't want them to go tough. Now, we're going to be ready to add the mash. Now we're at the stage where we want to get the mashed potato on top of our beautiful fish pie. I'm going to try something a little bit different. I saw somebody try this once. I'm no good at piping, and I'm really no good at cleaning piping bags after I've used them. So what I'm going to try here is just to get a standard freezer bag. I'm going to get my potato, which has been sat here for a few minutes now, and I'm going to get this into the freezer bag. I'm using completely the wrong tools for the job here. And I'm going to try and create a homemade basic piping bag using a freezer bag. So wish me luck. First time I've tried this. I'm experimenting here just as much as everybody else. We'll leave it at that for now. I can certainly add more to the bag a little bit later. Oh, in fact, no. I've just had a look. Plenty of room in the bag. If it goes wrong, I can soon take it back out of the bag as well, I suppose. There we go. It's all of our mashed potato is inside this freezer bag. I am going to... I'm not going to completely close this freezer bag, but I don't know whether you can see what I'm doing here. You probably can't, so let me move this out of the way. I'm not going to completely close the freezer bag, but I am going to remove some of the air from it, and then I'm going to close the zip to about 3/4 of the way shut. Finally, I'm going to tip it up this way. I'm going to pinch this corner here. Hopefully you can see that, just pinching the corner of the bag. So my first attempt was a little bit of a failure because I cut too much of the corner of the bag off, but I think that the technique is pretty sound. So I've cut another corner of the bag off, leaving a slightly bigger gap this time. Let's see how we go with this. The good thing about these freezer bags as well is that nothing seems to stick too much to the inside. So let's see how we go. That's a little bit better, I think. Oh yeah, that's much better. Okay, so confession time, people. The piping bag itself works, however, I am useless at piping. So I actually gave up. You know, as I said, the actual technique works quite nicely. You know, if you don't have a piping bag, you can use that. But my piping technique is just really poor. So I gave up. So I admitted defeat there, and I went in with the fork. Now, all we got to do to finish this pie off is get the rest of that cheese that we didn't use earlier in the mash. Not too much, because you don't want this to be overbearingly cheesy. Just sprinkle it on the top there. And then finally, we're going to go in with the last bit of colour that we're going to add to this dish, and that's some paprika straight over the top. Now, you can prepare this well in advance of like a dinner party or a family meal or whatever. This will keep in the fridge for a while. You can make it first thing in the morning and then cook it in the evening. I'm going to put this in the oven now. This is going to go in 180 for 15 minutes, and by then it will be ready to serve. Okay, so our fish pie has been in the oven on 180 for about 15 minutes, and as you can see, it's looking absolutely lovely. We've used the fork to fluff up the potato, and those have darkened down nicely, and our cheese has also started to take on a nice texture in the oven there as well. So what we're going to do, serve a piece of this up. There we go. Let's get that right in there. Absolutely lovely. Let me take this to one side and we'll show you what we've got. There you have it, fish pie. We've got cod in there, there's some smoked haddock in there, there's some prawns in there as well, some lovely potato, and it is absolutely superb. Well, the cheese just sets it off, the peas add a lovely bit of colour as well, and it's just a really nice hearty warming dish.
Oh, no.